The first lie entered St. George's, Hanover Square, beneath the arm of a footman, and gleamed like brass in the groom's hand. It was the 18th of March, 1861, and the church had been filled with the restrained splendor of a London wedding, arranged between two families who had spent months pretending affection and finance were separate matters. Candles burned along the altar. White flowers softened the stone. Ladies in pale silks inclined their heads beneath feathered bonnets, while gentlemen stood in ordered rows and watched Miss Amabel Kershaw approach the future. Everyone had told her was sensible. At 32, she had long ceased expecting romance to arrive like music. What she had hoped for instead was steadiness. Roland Marwood, Viscount Marwood, had praised her judgment, relied upon her patience, and spoken often of the peace she would bring to his household. She had believed that respect might become tenderness after marriage. She had not yet understood that he had mistaken usefulness for love. Amabel stood before him in ivory silk, her mother's small prayer book held between both gloved hands. A pressed sprig of myrtle rested unseen between its first pages. Her father, Sir Alwyn Kershaw, had placed her hand in Roland's moments earlier and stepped back with the weary relief of a man who believed one burden had finally passed into another household. The clergyman had begun the words that would lead to the vows when Roland raised one hand. Stop. The single word travelled through the church more sharply than a shout. The clergyman faltered. Amabel turned toward Roland, expecting illness, confusion, some sudden objection to a clause in the settlement. Instead, he reached inside his coat and produced an oval brass badge. The Bellgrave arms were stamped upon it. Age had darkened the grooves, but the crest remained unmistakable. Along the lower edge ran a hairline crack. Before I bind myself to this woman, Roland said, I believe the congregation deserves to know what was prepared behind my back. A murmur moved through the pews. Amabel felt every eye shift toward her. What is that? She asked. Her voice sounded calm enough to belong to someone else. Roland held the badge where the nearest witnesses could see it. Bellgrave livery. It was delivered to me this morning by a servant who believed I had the right to know. A hired carriage waited behind the church under Bellgrave authority. Your bridal trunk had already been removed from Kershaw House and was meant to follow. Sir Alwyn stiffened. The trunk left under proper instruction. The admission escaped him too quickly. Roland turned just enough to let the congregation hear. Then even her father confirms it. Amabel looked at Sir Alwyn. You allowed my trunk to leave? He did not meet her eyes. Lady Marwood's household said it was required in advance. The space beneath Amabel's ribs seemed to narrow. Roland had not merely invented a tale. He had found real movements of her property and arranged them around a lie. I gave no such instruction, she said. No, Roland replied. You expected not to need one in public. He faced the pews as though presenting evidence before a tribunal. Miss Kershaw intended to kneel before one man while packing for another. The murmur deepened. Somewhere to Amabel's left, a woman inhaled with theatrical distress. Lady Drusilla Marwood sat in the front pew, wearing silver-grey silk and the expression of a mother forced to endure another woman's depravity. She lowered her eyes at precisely the moment society required sorrow to look dignified. Amabel searched Roland's face for the man who had sat beside her through settlement dinners, who had thanked her for reviewing household accounts, who had called her composure a rare virtue. She found only calculation sharpened by anger. I did not arrange a carriage, she said. I did not ask anyone to remove my trunk. I did not plan to leave England. Roland's mouth curved without warmth. How fortunate that denial costs nothing. At the rear of the front pew, a tall man rose beside an older woman in black silk. Tristan Stavely, Duke of Bellgrave, did not hurry. He did not need to. His rank had long taught rooms to make space before he demanded it. Society called him feared, because he had brought peers before parliamentary committees, exposed contracts protected by title, and asked questions other men preferred to leave unspoken. Yet when his gaze settled on the badge, it was not anger that changed his face. It was recognition. That design has not been used by my household since 1859, he said. Roland turned toward him. How convenient. Tristan came only as far as the open aisle. His mother, the Dowager Duchess of Belgrave, remained behind him, watching Amabel rather than the crowd. Convenience does not alter dates, Tristan said. The badge is genuine but obsolete. The old harness fittings were retired and sold 2 years ago. Roland lifted it higher. Then it still belonged to Belgrave. It once did. That does not prove who used it this morning. Your Grace was present at the church, with my mother, who knew Miss Kershaw's mother. Tristan's tone remained level. My attendance is not evidence of an elopement. Roland's expression hardened. You seem remarkably eager to defend her. Tristan did not answer him. He looked at Amabel instead. The change in attention was so complete that the church seemed to recede. Miss Kershaw, did you arrange a carriage bearing Belgrave authority? No. Did you instruct any person to remove your bridal trunk from Kershaw House? No. Did you ask me to attend today? No. He asked no fourth question. He did not declare that her face proved innocence or that his instinct outweighed the object in Roland's hand. He allowed her answers to stand in their own shape. Roland laughed softly. 3 denials, and the Duke is satisfied. I am not satisfied, Tristan said. I am listening. The distinction struck the room into silence. Amabel felt something inside her steady. No one had listened since Roland raised the badge. They had watched, judged, whispered, and arranged her disgrace into a story they could repeat over dinner. Tristan had done something smaller and more dangerous. He had asked her. Roland stepped closer to Amabel. I mistook obedience for value. The words were quiet enough to be intimate and loud enough to carry. I believed your dutiful manner concealed loyalty. Instead, it concealed ambition. Amabel looked at the man she had nearly promised to obey. You have not proved anything. I have proved enough for a husband. You are not yet my husband. A flicker of fury crossed his face, and I thank Providence for that mercy. A wife who brings neither trust nor fortune is merely a burden dressed in white. The cruelty landed without ornament. Sir Alwyn closed his eyes. No one spoke. Amabel could hear the faint crackle of a candle near the altar, and the whisper of silk as someone in the pews leaned forward to see whether she would faint. She did not. The prayer book pressed against her palms. Beneath its ivory cover lay her mother's handwriting and the faded myrtle Amabel had carried, because she wanted one honest thing with her at the altar. Roland had called her a burden, because the fortune he expected was not freely his. Her father had let her trunk leave because another titled household had asked. The congregation waited for collapse, apology, or pleading. Amabel gave them none. Tristan crossed the last few feet between them. He did not touch her. He extended one gloved hand, palm upward. I won't tell you where to go, he said. You may leave by whichever door you choose. No one here will prevent you. His voice contained no command. That was why the offer broke through the shock. He was not promising safety he controlled. He was returning the choice. Roland had tried to strip from her. Amabel looked at the offered hand. The most feared man in the church stood waiting without certainty that she would take it. Her breath trembled once. Then she placed her hand in his. Tristan's fingers closed only enough to support, never enough to claim. A fresh murmur swept through the congregation. Roland's expression changed, as though her decision had confirmed every lie he had prepared. "There," he said. "You see?" Tristan released Amabel's hand only after she had stepped clear of Roland. Then he turned to face the groom. "Public cruelty is not proof," he said, "nor is a woman's refusal to remain beside the man who humiliated her." Roland held the badge like a verdict. "She took your hand before the entire church. I offered it before the entire church." Tristan's gaze did not leave him. "Her decision to take it is not evidence of anything, except that you made remaining beside you intolerable." Mr. Fenner, who had stood near Sir Alwyn during the ceremony, now approached from the side aisle carrying a small blue leather case. He was the only man present whose attention remained fixed upon the object rather than the scandal. "Lord Marwood," he said, "if you intend to rely upon that badge in any future statement, surrender it now so its condition may be recorded." Roland hesitated. Refusal would look worse than compliance. He placed the badge in Fenner's waiting cloth. Fenner noted the Bellgrave arms, the hairline crack at the lower edge, the visible maker's mark, the time, and the hand from which it had been received. He placed it inside the blue leather case, locked it, and applied a numbered seal across the fastening. The entire process took less than a minute. The congregation watched a piece of brass become evidence. Amabel watched Roland realize that his performance had created a record he no longer controlled. Tristan looked once at the sealed case, then at her. "The old Bellgrave set contained 2 badges," he said quietly. Amabel's fingers tightened around her mother's prayer book. Badge A had been raised before the altar. Somewhere beyond the church, Badge B was still waiting to be used. The vestry door closed upon the sound of a church learning how quickly devotion could become gossip. Inside, the air smelled of old wood, extinguished wax, and damp wool carried in from the March Street. Amabel stood beside a narrow table with her mother's prayer book held against her waist. Tristan released her hand the moment they crossed the threshold. The gesture was so immediate that no one could mistake his support for possession. He moved several paces away and took his place beside the Dowager Duchess, leaving Amabel free to stand wherever she chose. Mr. Fenner entered last. The blue leather evidence case remained beneath his left hand, its numbered seal unbroken across the fastening. "The object will remain closed until a formal inspection can be witnessed," he said. "I have recorded the time of surrender, its visible condition, and the identity of the person who placed it in my custody." Roland stood near the opposite wall, his anger sharpened by the fact that the badge no longer belonged to his performance. Lady Drusilla remained close to him, one gloved hand resting lightly on the back of a chair. Sir Alwyn paced twice before turning toward Amabel. "You must put an end to this before the congregation disperses." She looked at him. "How?" "Speak to Roland privately. Explain that you did not understand how matters appeared. Offer an apology for the confusion." The prayer book pressed more firmly against her palm. "What should I apologize for?" "For allowing circumstances to become intolerable. He created those circumstances." Sir Alwyn lowered his voice, though every person in the room could still hear. "He is humiliated." Amabel glanced toward the closed door, beyond which Roland's accusation was already passing from pew to carriage. He chose the audience. That does not mean you must make the damage permanent. Roland gave a short laugh. Your daughter has made her preference plain. My preference, Amabel said, turning toward him, is not to marry a man who has already transformed me into a public defense. Sir Alwyn's face tightened. Do not speak in anger. I am not angry enough to be careless. That answer silenced him for a moment. Lady Drusilla stepped forward with a sorrowful composure that seemed practiced for rooms where other people's pain was inconvenient. Miss Kershaw, a gracious woman, understands that appearances have consequences. Roland was presented with a Bellgrave badge, an absent trunk, and a carriage said to be waiting under ducal authority. Any honourable man would have been alarmed. An honourable man might have asked me, before accusing me, before the altar. Drusilla's mouth curved faintly. A man betrayed before his wedding cannot be expected to speak with perfect restraint. Yet you expect perfect restraint from the woman he accused. The Dowager Duchess lowered her gaze, concealing what might have been approval. Drusilla did not look at her. Society is unforgiving, she said. You may find that doors close more quickly than they open. Society was present when your son chose cruelty, Amabel replied. I will not purchase its kindness by pretending he did not. Sir Alwyn stopped pacing. Then where do you mean to go? You cannot return immediately to Kershaw House. The servants have already seen the trunk removed. Reporters may be waiting before we arrive. The words struck her more deeply than she allowed to show. He spoke of the house as though scandal had made it unavailable to her, though it had been her home since childhood. She looked past him to Tristan. He did not offer Bellgrave House. He did not even move. The restraint gave her room to think. I will go to Aunt Louisa in Bloomsbury, she said. She is my mother's sister. She is respectable, widowed, and under no obligation to Marwood or Bellgrave. Sir Alwyn frowned. Louisa's house is too small for this kind of attention. Then attention will have to make itself uncomfortable. The Dowager Duchess rose. I shall accompany Miss Kershaw there. Drusilla turned sharply. That will be interpreted. Everything will be interpreted, the older Duchess said. My presence will at least prevent anyone from claiming. His Grace carried Miss Kershaw secretly to his own house. Tristan inclined his head to his mother. He had clearly understood the same danger. Amabel felt a quiet gratitude she was not ready to name. My aunt's carriage was ordered to wait after the ceremony, she said. I will use it. Tristan spoke for the first time since entering the room. My carriage is available at the west entrance if hers has been dismissed. Thank you, Your Grace. I would prefer Aunt Louisa's. Then that is what you shall have. No offence. No insistence. Sir Alwyn looked between them as though choice itself had become a form of rebellion. Fenner placed the evidence case on the table without releasing it. Before anyone leaves, I require several answers while recollections remain fresh. Roland folded his arms. You speak as though I am under examination. You introduced physical evidence into a public accusation. I am treating it accordingly. Fenner opened his notebook. Who delivered the badge to you? A servant. Whose servant? He did not give a household name. Did he give his own? No. Where did he approach you? Outside the church before the ceremony. Did he tell you where the carriage could be found? Roland hesitated. He said it was waiting behind the church. Did you see it? No. Fenner's pen paused. Did anyone you trust see it? The servant's information was sufficient when joined with the missing trunk. That was not my question. Roland's jaw hardened. No one in my household inspected the carriage. Fenner recorded the answer. Did the servant state that Miss Kershaw had hired it. He said she meant to leave. Those are not the same statement. Lady Drusilla intervened. Mr. Fenner, my son had minutes before his vows. He was not conducting a legal inquiry. Precisely why the inquiry must begin now. Fenner turned to Tristan. Your Grace, can you confirm whether the badge design shown in the church was formerly used by Bellgrave? Yes. It belonged to an old matched set retired in 1859. How many badges were in the set? 2. What became of them? They were removed with retired harness fittings and sent through a carriage dealer. My head coachman will know which establishment handled the sale. Do you know the purchaser? I do not. Could the badge have remained in Bellgrave possession? Not through any authorized household inventory. Roland seized upon the phrasing, so it might have been stolen. Anything might be alleged, Tristan said. Evidence will decide what can be proved. Fenner noted the response. Until the second badge is located, no one should assume the first was the only Bellgrave object obtained. Drusilla's fingers tightened against the chair. The movement was small. Amabel saw it. She could not know what it meant, but she remembered it. Sir Alwyn moved closer to Fenner. All of this can wait. The immediate concern is whether Lord Marwood will reconsider once Miss Kershaw has reflected. Roland looked at Amabel with the cold expectation of a man accustomed to seeing her repair discomfort. I will not reconsider while she stands beneath another man's protection. Tristan's expression did not change. Miss Kershaw stands beneath no protection she did not choose. You offered your hand before witnesses. I offered her an exit from your humiliation, and she took it readily. Amabel met Roland's gaze. I took the first thing offered to me that did not demand my silence. The words landed more quietly than the accusation in the church, but Roland looked away first. Fenner closed his notebook halfway. There is one further matter. Sir Alwyn's face changed before the solicitor continued. Amabel noticed. Yesterday afternoon, Lord Marwood requested a final reading of the marriage settlement. Roland said nothing. Fenner looked directly at Amabel. He asked 3 questions. None concerned your future residence, household allowance, jointure, or obligations to Kershaw House. What did he ask? She said. Whether a husband might direct the trustees of your maternal property. Whether the principal could be advanced after marriage for the purchase of land, and whether debts contracted before marriage could be satisfied from that capital. The room seemed to narrow around the words. Amabel thought of Roland at dinner the previous evening, smiling when she asked whether his mother preferred the carriage to depart after breakfast. He had known then that the money was not simply waiting to become his. What answer did you give him? She asked. Fenner's expression grew grave. That your trust income could support the marriage according to the settlement, but the principal remained protected for your separate use. A husband could not take it merely because he wished to discharge his own debts. Roland's face lost color. Not much. Enough. Amabel saw the truth before anyone spoke it aloud. He had not stopped the wedding because a mysterious servant appeared with a badge. He had entered the church already, knowing that the fortune he expected would remain beyond his reach. By noon on the 19th of March, Amabel knew the exact date upon which Roland had expected her fortune to save him. The knowledge lay in a single line of figures on the table in Aunt Louisa's drawing room. Outside, Bloomsbury moved beneath a grey spring sky, carriage wheels whispering over damp stones and tradesmen calling from the street. Inside, the curtains had been drawn against curious eyes. Amabel wore a dark blue day dress borrowed from her aunt. Her wedding gown had been folded away before breakfast. Her mother's ivory prayer book rested beside her right hand, closed and still in her possession. Across from her, Mr. Fenner arranged 3 certified papers taken from the marriage settlement negotiations. He had not brought the original banking records. Those remained where they lawfully belonged, nor had he brought the blue leather evidence case. Badge A remained locked at his chambers beneath the numbered seal applied in the vestry. Aunt Louisa sat near the hearth, composed and watchful. The Dowager Duchess occupied the chair beside her. Tristan stood at the far end of the room, distant enough to avoid any appearance of intimacy and attentive enough that Amabel never doubted he heard every word. Fenner touched the first paper. This is a certified particular of Lord Marwood's declared obligations. Amabel looked at the sum. It was greater than the annual income of Kershaw House. Declared obligations, she repeated, meaning there are others. Possibly. These are the debts his solicitor admitted because they were expected to be discharged after marriage. Fenner turned the page. The largest is a bill of exchange due on the 15th of May. The date struck her with an intimacy no amount could have achieved. By the 15th of May, she and Roland should have been settled into the first weeks of married life. She had imagined household accounts, morning calls, and the careful beginning of companionship. Roland had imagined a creditor presenting paper. What happens if it is not paid? She asked. The holder may proceed against him. Land income could be attached. Further credit would become difficult. Aunt Louisa leaned forward, and he believed Amabel's trust would satisfy it. He believed marriage would give him access to the principal. Fenner placed a second document before Amabel. It would not. The trust had been created through her mother's family. Its income could be used for Amabel's separate benefit and, under the settlement, for agreed household purposes after marriage. The capital itself remained under trustees. A husband could not direct it toward his personal debts merely because the wedding had taken place. Amabel read the clause twice. She had seen earlier drafts, but not the final language in this form. Sir Alwyn had told her the distinctions were tiresome and that Fenner would protect everyone's interests. She had believed the matter too dull to deserve suspicion. Now each careful sentence looked like a locked door. Roland had expected to find open. When did he learn this? She asked. Yesterday afternoon. I answered his questions plainly. Did he object? Not in the room. He asked whether the trustees might advance capital for the purchase of land. Land he already intended to mortgage, Tristan said. It was his first interruption. Fenner gave a cautious nod. That is possible, Your Grace. We do not yet possess evidence of his intended use beyond the disclosed debts. Tristan accepted the correction without resistance. Amabel noticed. He did not force certainty merely because certainty would comfort her. Fenner indicated the third paper. There is also correspondence from a private banking house referring to the anticipated marriage portion. Your property was never formally pledged, yet the engagement encouraged confidence that substantial funds would soon become available. He borrowed because men believed he was marrying money, Aunt Louisa said, and when he discovered he was not, Amabel replied, he needed a reason to abandon the wedding without appearing to abandon it for money. No one answered at once. The room held the conclusion between them. She looked again at the due date. 15th of May. Roland had known exactly how long he had before expectation became demand. The memory of his attention during their engagement altered under that knowledge. He had praised her calm when she accepted changes to their plans. He had thanked her for reviewing household expenses. He had spoken of trust as though it were affection. Perhaps some part of him had liked her. The thought did not soften the truth. Whatever feeling existed had been conditional upon access. The badge may have been prepared as insurance, she said. Fenner's gaze sharpened. Explain. If the principal became available, Roland could marry me and discharge his debts. If it remained protected, he could produce a scandal that made him the injured party. Tristan's expression grew still. That would mean the accusation was planned before yesterday. Yes, we do not yet know when the badge was purchased. Fenner cautioned. No, Amabel said. But if it was obtained before the final settlement meeting, then he did not act from shock. He prepared a choice for himself while leaving me none. The sentence cost more than she expected. Her fingers rested on the prayer book cover. Not for comfort exactly, but to remind herself that one honest thing had remained in her hands. Tristan came no closer. There is a way to limit what follows, he said. Amabel looked up. What way? A private resolution. Marwood could withdraw the allegation without admitting deliberate deceit. The wedding expenses could be repaid. A statement might describe the collapse as a misunderstanding caused by unreliable information. Aunt Louisa's expression cooled. Fenner remained silent. Tristan continued with the care of a man presenting shelter. Public proceedings would expose the trust, your father's finances, Marwood's debts, and every meeting in which my name appears. The newspapers would treat the matter as sport. Quiet may spare you that. Amabel studied him. He believed he was protecting her. That made the answer harder. Contained for whom? A faint line appeared between his brows. For you? No, I would be hidden from it. She kept her voice low. Roland accused me before a church full of witnesses. Every person who heard him may repeat that. I meant to flee with you. A private statement would not erase the accusation. It would only erase my answer. It might prevent further injury. The injury is already public. Tristan's gaze moved briefly toward the prayer book, then back to her face. A court cannot guarantee restoration. Neither can silence. It can sometimes prevent cruelty from multiplying. And sometimes it preserves cruelty in its most useful form. The words settled heavily. Amabel did not wish to wound him. She wished him to understand the shape of what he offered. If Roland is allowed to call this a misunderstanding, he keeps his honor. Society will say the matter ended quietly because the truth was uncertain. I will be expected to disappear until people lose interest. Then I may return only if I am grateful for being tolerated. Tristan did not defend himself. That restraint mattered. You believe I advised you wrongly, he said. Yes. Aunt Louisa glanced at the Dowager Duchess, but neither woman intervened. Tristan looked toward the dark window. When he spoke again, there was no offense in his voice. Then I did. Fenner lifted his pen. Miss Kershaw, if you wish to pursue an action for breach of promise, you will require counsel independent of Kershaw, Marwood, and Bellgrave interests. I cannot direct the action while holding settlement records and physical evidence. Can you arrange an introduction? I can. Then do so. You need not decide today whether to commence proceedings. I have decided that preparation must begin. Her hand flattened over the prayer book. I will not be hurried into filing before the evidence is ready, but I will not be frightened into silence while Roland prepares the only version society is allowed to hear. Fenner nodded once. I shall request independent advice and prepare certified materials from my office. Tristan remained where he was. What do you require from me? Facts, Amabel said. Nothing more. Something changed in his expression. Not disappointment, but recognition. Then facts are what I will give. A knock interrupted them. Aunt Louisa's butler entered, carrying a folded note upon a silver salver. The black wax seal bore the Marwood crest. "Delivered by hand, madam." Aunt Louisa looked at Amabel. "Shall I return it?" "No." Amabel broke the seal herself. Lady Drusilla's message contained 4 measured lines. If Miss Kershaw persisted in turning private sorrow into public accusation, respectable houses would close their doors to her. No hostess of judgment would welcome a woman determined to drag an ancient family through the courts. Amabel read the warning twice. Then she handed it to Fenner. "Keep that with the correspondence." Tristan watched her. "Does it change your decision?" She rested her palm once more upon the ivory cover beneath which her mother's words waited. It confirms when their fear began. On the morning of the 22nd March, Amabel entered Mrs. Penrose's drawing room and discovered that 3 women had already decided not to see her. One examined the silver clasp of her reticule. Another turned a page in the committee ledger without reading it. The third looked through the window, as though the damp Bloomsbury Street had produced something more compelling than a bride abandoned before the altar. Amabel removed her gloves and placed them beside the subscription papers. She had promised to attend this meeting before the wedding. The relief committee supplied coal, bread, and paid sewing work to widows in 2 poor parishes. Her humiliation had not reduced their rent. "Miss Kershaw," Mrs. Penrose said, rising with strained warmth. "We weren't certain you would come." "I said I would." A lady near the fire shifted in her chair. "Circumstances have changed. Not for the women whose coal allowance ends on Monday." Amabel sat. She wore a plain grey day dress from Aunt Louisa's wardrobe, with no ornament beyond a dark ribbon at her throat. Her mother's prayer book remained locked in the drawer beside her bed. She would not carry its private comfort into a room already prepared to inspect her. Mrs. Penrose cleared her throat. "There has been some difficulty with the spring subscriptions. Lady Denham and Mrs. Crowley have asked that their pledges be delayed." "Withdrawn," Lady Denham corrected, "until the committee's associations are less likely to invite comment." The 2 pledges together would provide coal for 12 households. Amabel opened the ledger and looked at the amounts. "The committee is associated with widows," she said. "Not with my wedding." "People may not make so fine a distinction," Lady Denham replied. "Then the record should." Before Mrs. Penrose could answer, the drawing-room door opened, and Lady Drusilla Marwood entered in black silk. Though she was not in mourning, the gown gave her the dignity of a woman injured by another person's disgrace. She carried no ledger and offered no subscription. She had come to control the room. "I hope I am not intruding," she said. Mrs. Penrose stood again. "Lady Marwood, we did not expect you." "No, I imagine much of this week has been unexpected." Drusilla let her gaze rest upon Amabel with carefully measured sorrow. "I came because I could not bear to see a worthy charity suffer through a private misunderstanding." Amabel closed the ledger. "Your note threatened to close respectable houses to me if I defended my name." A small silence opened. Drusilla smiled as though correcting a child who had spoken too literally. "My note was written in distress. Roland has been deeply wounded." He spoke clearly enough for the whole church to hear. A man confronted with betrayal does not always choose perfect language. Neither does a woman confronted with accusation. Yet you have required perfection from me. Mrs. Penrose placed both hands upon the table. "Perhaps we might return to the subscriptions." "That is precisely why I came." Drusilla said. She turned toward the other women. No one should punish the poor for what Miss Kershaw may have intended. Whatever arrangements were made for a carriage, whatever trunk was moved. The recipients of this fund are innocent. The cruelty lay in the grammar. Drusilla spoke of carriage and trunk as settled facts while offering charity as proof of generosity. Lady Denham looked relieved. "Then you do not deny that there was an arrangement?" she asked Amabel. "I deny that I made one." But a Bellgrave badge was produced. An obsolete Bellgrave badge was produced by Lord Marwood and placed in Mr. Fenner's sealed custody. Drusilla lowered her eyes. Such precision can sound cold when hearts are involved. Precision is useful when reputations are being destroyed. Mrs. Crowley folded her hands. "Miss Kershaw, surely you understand why people are confused. Your trunk had left your father's house. A carriage was said to be waiting. His Grace was present at the church." Amabel felt the old training rise within her, the habit of softening every answer so that another person might remain comfortable. She let the impulse pass. "If I meant to flee England, why did I arrive at church without a travelling cloak, a money case, a companion, travel documents, or even possession of my own trunk?" No one moved. Rain tapped against the window and then faded. Mrs. Crowley's lips parted, but no answer came. Lady Denham looked toward Drusilla. The Dowager Viscountess had expected shame. She had not expected logistics. "A frightened woman may act irrationally," Drusilla said. "Then your accusation requires me to be calculating enough to arrange an elopement, and foolish enough to prepare none of the things it would require." Amabel leaned forward only slightly. "Which woman do you ask this committee to condemn?" Drusilla's composure thinned. "I ask only that compassion be shown to my son." "Did he show compassion when he called me a burden before the altar?" Mrs. Penrose inhaled sharply. Drusilla's eyes hardened for a single instant. Roland believed he had been deceived. Then he should welcome an inquiry into who obtained the badge, who moved the trunk, and whether any carriage existed at all. That was the question Drusilla could not answer without approaching danger. She turned toward Mrs. Penrose. "I see this meeting has become something other than charitable business." "No," Amabel said. "It has become exactly charitable business. We are deciding whether 12 widows lose coal because 2 ladies dislike being seen beside me." Lady Denham coloured. Mrs. Crowley looked down at the ledger. Mrs. Penrose straightened. "The fund will proceed. Any withdrawn pledge will be recorded as withdrawn." The word recorded altered the room. Lady Denham reached for her reticule. Mrs. Crowley stopped her. "Mine will remain." It was not affection. It was not courage great enough to praise. It was the first crack in certainty, and that was enough. Drusilla left without taking tea. After the committee business ended, Mrs. Penrose led Amabel into a smaller morning room where 2 seamstresses waited with unpaid invoices from the cancelled wedding. The elder woman held her bonnet in both hands. "Lady Marwood's steward says the work was not completed because the marriage didn't occur. But every stitch was finished, miss. We delivered the veil and alterations on time." Amabel examined the accounts. The sums were modest to a titled household and serious to women who lived by the week. "You will be paid today. We didn't come to trouble you. You did the work. The broken ceremony was not your fault." She wrote an instruction against her separate income and asked Mrs. Penrose's secretary to witness it. When she returned to the drawing room, the Dowager Duchess had arrived with Tristan and Mr. Rudge, the Bellgrave head coachman. Tristan remained near the door, far enough from Amabel that no one could call the meeting intimate. Mrs. Penrose had requested a factual statement concerning the retired livery, and he had brought the man most qualified to provide it. "Mr. Rudge," she said, "can you confirm whether the badge design shown at St. George's was once used by Bellgrave?" "It was, madam." The older man stood with his hat beneath one arm. The set was retired in 1859, when the household adopted the present pattern. "How many badges were in the set?" "Two, a matched pair, same casting, same maker, same set number." Amabel kept her expression still. Badge A remained sealed at Fenner's chambers. Badge B had not yet appeared. "Were they sold separately, Mrs.?" Penrose asked. "Not when they left Bellgrave. They were sent together with retired harness fittings to a carriage dealer." Tristan spoke only when Mrs. Penrose turned to him. "Do you know who purchased them, Your Grace?" "I don't. Mr. Fenner is seeking the dealer's records." He did not proclaim Amabel innocent. He supplied only what could be supported. She felt the restraint as a form of respect. A servant entered before the meeting could end and announced Mr. Fenner. He came carrying a single copied page, not an original ledger. "The carriage dealer has located the relevant entry," he said. "His records remain in his possession, but he has provided a preliminary certified copy." He placed it on the table. The line identified retired harness fittings and two oval Bellgrave badges sold together. The purchaser's name had not yet been verified. The date had. Fenner pointed to it. 2 March 1861. Amabel read the figure once, then again. 16 days before the wedding, long before Roland learned the final settlement would protect her principal. Someone had already bought the means to make her appear faithless. On the 24th March, the blue leather evidence case entered the Bellgrave carriage house beneath Mr. Fenner's hand and did not leave his sight for a single moment. The long brick building stood behind Bellgrave House in Mayfair, its high windows admitting a cold, even light over polished harness, carriage lamps, and orderly rows of brass fittings. Amabel arrived with Aunt Louisa and the Dowager Duchess in Aunt Louisa's enclosed carriage. Tristan received them at the side entrance rather than the grand steps, and every person present signed a short attendance sheet before the inspection began. Nothing about the morning was permitted to resemble secrecy. Mr. Rudge, the Bellgrave head coachman, waited beside a narrow table prepared beneath the largest window. Upon it lay an archived livery drawing, a magnifying lens, fresh sealing paper, red wax, and a clean square of folded cloth. Fenner placed the blue case at the center. "Before I open it," he said, "I will record that the numbered seal applied in the vestry on the 18th of March remains intact." He turned the fastening toward each witness in turn. Amabel saw the original strip crossing the lock, the number written in Fenner's hand, and the signatures placed there after Roland surrendered badge A. Aunt Louisa confirmed it. The Dowager Duchess confirmed it. Mr. Rudge and Tristan did the same. Amabel added her name last. Fenner then broke the original seal in full view of them, recorded the time, unlocked the case, and lifted the badge with the folded cloth beneath it. The brass looked darker in daylight than it had beneath the church candles. The Bellgrave arms remained clear. Along the lower edge ran the same hairline crack Amabel had seen in Roland's hand. Mr. Rudge bent closer without touching it. "That is the left-hand badge," he said. "I remember the damage." Tristan looked at him. "How did it occur?" "At Rookhaven Court, Your Grace." The old near-side harness struck a stone post when a young horse turned too sharply. The maker said the crack would deepen if the fitting took another blow. so the pair was removed before the following season. Fenner angled the badge just enough to expose the underside. Mr. Rudge compared the small stamped mark with the archived drawing. Morridge and Sons, he said. The same maker. The set number should be beside the fastening. Fenner used the lens. It is present. He read the number aloud and wrote it into the inspection record. Mr. Rudge nodded. The second badge carried the same number. It had no crack. Amabel watched fact replace suggestion, one measured detail at a time. Roland had not displayed an imitation. Someone had obtained a genuine piece of discarded Bellgrave livery, chosen the cracked badge, and placed it where it could be recognized publicly. The truth made the accusation more deliberate, not less. "Can you confirm when the pair left Bellgrave possession?" she asked. Mr. Rudge turned toward the inventory book open beside the drawing. November 1859. 2 oval badges, retired straps, 4 buckles, and the old breastplate fittings were sent together to a dealer in Long Acre. They were not divided here. No, miss. And no, Bellgrave's servant retained either badge. Not through any authorized inventory. Fenner recorded the answer without embellishment. He then placed badge A back inside the blue case, closed the lid, and locked it. Over the fastening, he applied a fresh strip of sealing paper. He wrote BA2 across it, pressed red wax over the ends, and asked each witness to initial the new seal. This replacement seal records that the original vestry seal was opened lawfully today for inspection, he said. The full custody history will remain with the case. Only when every name had been added did he lift the case from the table. Badge A had left no one's control. It had existed in one place, under one custody, before every movement was witnessed. Amabel felt some tension leave her shoulders. The badge had once been used to make her appear faithless. Now even its handling refused deception. Mr. Rudge and Fenner withdrew to copy the relevant inventory entry. Aunt Louisa accompanied the Dowager Duchess toward an old state coach, displayed near the rear doors, granting Amabel and Tristan a measure of privacy while remaining within sight. Tristan stood opposite her beneath the high window. "You were right at your aunt's house," he said. Amabel knew at once what he meant. "About silence?" "Yes. You already admitted the advice was wrong. I admitted the result. I did not tell you what shaped the advice." He looked toward the sealed case in Fenner's hands. "People call me feared because I have spent years asking questions that powerful men wanted buried. I have exposed contracts, challenged appointments, and forced evidence into rooms where rank expected obedience. That does not explain why you preferred privacy. 7 years ago, a clerk in the Office of Works was accused of accepting payment from a contractor. The testimony appeared complete. I believed delay would allow influence to destroy the inquiry, so I pressed for censure before every account had been examined." Amabel said nothing. His restraint had changed. It no longer looked like cool control. It looked like a man returning to a room he disliked entering. "Was the clerk guilty?" she asked. "No. Money had changed hands, but not through him. By the time the truth emerged, he had lost his position. His wife had taken their children to her brother's house because they could no longer afford their rooms." "What happened after he was cleared?" "I found him another appointment. I paid what could be paid." Tristan's mouth tightened almost imperceptibly. None of it restored the months when everyone who knew his name believed the worst. "Did you apologize?" "Yes." "Did he forgive you?" "He said forgiveness did not return time." The answer was too honest to invite comfort. Amabel looked at the rows of harness hanging behind him, each buckle aligned. every strap held in its appointed place. So, when you advised a private resolution, you feared another public judgment, made too soon. Yes, and you feared being responsible for it. Yes, that was not entirely about protecting me. Tristan met her gaze. No, the admission came without defense. Part of me wanted to create boundaries I could control. A payment, a statement, distance from the newspapers. I called that safety because it sounded more honorable than fear. Amabel felt the truth of it before she decided what to do with it. You wanted to protect me without trusting me to choose the risk. Yes, the cold light held between them. She could have softened the judgment because he had confessed it. She did not. That is still a form of power. I know. Something in her eased, not because the wrong had vanished, but because he had placed no burden upon her to make it smaller. Amabel opened the reticule at her wrist and removed her mother's ivory prayer book. She had brought it herself. She held it with both hands and opened the cover. Between the first pages lay the pressed myrtle, pale with age and almost weightless. On the inside cover, her mother's handwriting remained visible in faded brown ink. Amabel turned the book so Tristan could read without taking it from her. No promise is righteous when fear is the price of keeping it. His eyes moved across the sentence once, then returned to the beginning. Your mother wrote this before she died. I was 8. What did you think it meant? For years, I thought it meant I should be brave enough to keep every promise I made. She looked down at the myrtle. Now I think it also means fear can corrupt the promise itself. Marwood relied upon your sense of duty. He relied upon my willingness to remain useful. Tristan did not reach for the page, and I relied upon my right to decide what danger you should avoid. Yes, I won't ask you to disappear again. The contraction made the promise sound personal rather than ceremonial. Amabel closed the book. Then do not promise me victory either. I won't. Give me only what you know, that I can do. Their eyes held for one quiet moment. No touch followed. The distance between them remained proper, yet it no longer felt empty. Fenner returned from the far table, carrying a folded note delivered by a messenger from Long Acre. Mr. Vale has remembered the purchaser more clearly, he said. He was a servant wearing Marwood livery. Tristan's expression sharpened. Did Vale record a name? Not on the preliminary copy. He believes the receipt bundle may identify the servant and the authority presented for the purchase. He is searching it now. Amabel slipped the prayer book back into her reticule. The circle had narrowed from London to one household. Somewhere inside Marwood's service was the man who had bought both badges more than 2 weeks before the wedding. And one of them had still not appeared. On the 27th March, the carriage dealer's receipt bundle yielded the name that Marwood House had tried to hide behind livery. Mr. Vale received them in a narrow office above his Long Acre establishment, where the windows looked down upon rows of wheels, shafts, lamps, and harness fittings waiting to be bought by men who cared more for appearance than history. Amabel sat beside Aunt Louisa at a scarred wooden table. Mr. Fenner occupied the chair opposite, while Tristan and the Dowager Duchess remained near the door. Their presence had been recorded before the meeting began, but Tristan had asked no Bellgrave servant to accompany him. Badge A remained sealed beneath BA2 at Fenner's chambers. Vale possessed only his own records, exactly where they belonged. He placed the original sales book on the table and opened it to Lot 47. Beside it lay a narrow receipt stub tied to the rest of the bundle with cotton tape. I found the entry after your messenger left, he said. The copied page gave only the lot and date. The receipt has the purchaser's signature. Fenner leaned closer without touching either document. Read it aloud, please. Vale adjusted his spectacles. Received from Mr. Peake, household servant, acting under the written authority of Lady Drusilla Marwood, the sum of £3 and 8 shillings for retired harness fittings and 2 oval Bellgrave badges. The room became still. Amabel looked at the date. 2 March. 16 days before the wedding. 15 days before Roland learned the final settlement would keep her maternal principle beyond his reach. Tristan's voice remained level. Did Peake present the written authority himself? He did. Do you still possess it? Vale shook his head. No, I returned it after copying the instruction into the receipt. It was a household order, not a transfer deed. I had no reason then to keep a lady's private direction. Fenner made a note. Describe it. Cream paper. Marwood crest. Her ladyship's signature. The instruction said to purchase the whole lot, not merely 1 badge. Aunt Louisa looked toward Amabel. Both were wanted from the beginning. Yes, Amabel said. She did not allow the conclusion to outrun the proof. Wanted. We still do not know what purpose she gave Peake. Vale shifted in his chair. He said they were for a private pageant. A child's pony cart, I believe. With Belgrave arms? Tristan asked. I thought it odd, Your Grace, but old fittings are bought for theatre, garden follies, tavern signs, all manner of decoration. The pieces had been lawfully retired. They had, Tristan said. The purchase itself was lawful. Vale's shoulders lowered slightly. Then I have not done wrong. That depends upon whether you now tell the truth without improving it, Tristan replied. Do not claim you knew the purpose if you did not. Vale straightened. I did not know it. Amabel heard the restraint in Tristan's answer. He could have used rank to frighten the dealer into certainty. Instead, he protected the record from exaggeration, even when exaggeration might have helped her. Fenner asked Vale to identify the physical descriptions entered in the lot book. Vale pointed to the first line. 1 oval badge with a hairline crack along the lower edge. 1 matching badge without damage. Same maker, same set number. Both formerly part of Bellgrave harness. The cracked badge would be the one produced at the church, Amabel said. If the inspection record corresponds, Fenner replied. It does, Tristan said, but the court must make the formal comparison. Amabel looked at the unmarked line describing the second badge. Badge B had left this establishment with Peake on the 2nd of March and had not yet appeared. Its absence no longer felt accidental. Did Peake collect the lot himself? She asked. Yes. He arrived in Marwood livery with a small cart and took the harness fittings, straps, buckles, and both badges. Was anyone with him? A boy from the household stable. I did not know his name. Fenner requested certified copies of the relevant entries and a signed statement. Vale agreed. The original sales book and receipt stub remained in his possession under written notice that neither was to be altered or destroyed. Nothing crossed into Fenner's custody except the copies and Vale's statement. When the formalities were complete, Amabel remained seated for 1 moment longer. Roland had not improvised a lie after learning the settlement terms. Drusilla had purchased the means before the final answer was known. The cruelty was not only planned, it had been held in reserve. They prepared the accusation in case the marriage failed to profit them, she said. Fenner closed his notebook. That is a reasonable inference. It is not yet proof of how they meant to use the badges. No, Amabel replied. But it proves the wedding was never simply a promise to them. It was a wager with a weapon beneath the table. Tristan's gaze rested on her face, and one of the weapons is still missing. By late afternoon, they were back at Aunt Louisa's house in Bloomsbury. Sir Alwyn arrived before the lamps were lit, his coat damp at the shoulders and his expression drawn tight with irritation. He refused tea and remained standing in the front drawing-room as though sitting might make the questions more official. Aunt Louisa took her place beside Amabel. Fenner sat near the writing desk. Tristan and the Dowager Duchess remained by the window, present but removed from the centre of the conversation. "You sent a clerk to Kershaw House to question my porter," Sir Alwyn said. "Mr." Fenner asked who collected my bridal trunk. Amabel replied. "It was transferred properly." "To whom?" "Lady Marwood's household." "On whose authority?" Sir Alwyn looked toward Fenner. "Lady Drusilla said the trunk was required at the intended marital residence before the ceremony. Roland and I were not to leave London until the following afternoon. Household preparations begin before a bride arrives. Did you ask me? There was no reason to burden you with arrangements on the eve of your wedding." Amabel held his gaze. "My own property leaving the house was not an arrangement beneath my notice. It was a bridal trunk. It was meant to leave eventually. After I did." His mouth tightened. "What difference does one night make?" "It makes the difference between consent and obedience assigned to me by someone else." The words landed more quietly than anger would have. Sir Alwyn looked away first. Fenner opened his notebook. "Who collected it? A Marwood servant. Name?" "I did not ask." "Description?" "Dark green livery. Silver braid. The porter dealt with him." Amabel felt the answer settle into place. "Pique. Did he present anything?" Fenner asked. "A note from Lady Marwood and a household order for the trunk." "Did you retain the note?" "No. I signed the release in the household book." "Did Lady Marwood explain why the trunk had to leave that evening?" Sir Alwyn hesitated. The silence changed the room. She said the wedding arrangements had become delicate. Amabel waited. He drew a breath. She said Roland might cancel the marriage if the trunk was not transferred at once. Aunt Louisa's face hardened, and you obeyed. "I believed I was preserving Amabel's future, without asking Amabel whether that future still deserved preserving," Aunt Louisa said. Sir Alwyn turned to his daughter. "I did not know any badge existed. I did not know a carriage would be mentioned. I thought Lady Drusilla was asserting household authority before the marriage. You allowed her to assert it over me, before I belonged to her household. I was trying to prevent disaster. You opened the door through which it entered." Pain crossed his face, but Amabel did not withdraw the truth. "Where was the trunk taken?" she asked. "Marwood House, I assumed." Fenner spoke. "Their steward denies receiving it." Sir Alwyn stared at him. "Then Pique took it elsewhere." "We have not yet proved the collector was Pique," Fenner cautioned. "Your porter may be able to identify him. Until then, we know only that a Marwood servant collected the trunk under Lady Drusilla's pressure." "And it has been missing since the 17th March, Amabel said. Tristan stepped away from the window. "I can issue a public statement now. I can say that Miss Kershaw never arranged travel with me, never entered my carriage, and never communicated any wish to leave with Bellgrave assistance." Sir Alwyn seized upon the offer. That would end this. Amabel looked at Tristan. He had offered facts, not rescue. Even so, society would not hear the distinction. "Not yet," she said. Her father's disbelief was immediate. "You refuse the one name people will respect. If His Grace speaks before the evidence is complete, they will call it protection offered by a lover. My denial will become gratitude. His truth will become attachment." Tristan studied her. You want the evidence to lead? Yes, then it will. Sir Alwyn turned away in frustration. Fenner closed his notebook. We must assume the missing trunk and badge B may still be intended for use. The warning remained with Amabel after everyone had gone. Somewhere in London, her trunk and the second Bellgrave badge were waiting under another person's control. 4 mornings later, before dawn had fully reached the windows of Aunt Louisa's house, iron wheels entered the forecourt and stopped. A driver's voice rose loudly enough to wake the neighboring houses. Carriage for Miss Kershaw, by order of the Duke of Bellgrave. Dover without delay. At dawn on the 31st March, the carriage entered Aunt Louisa's forecourt under a lie, loud enough to wake the neighboring houses. The porter had opened the iron gate because the driver claimed to carry urgent Bellgrave instructions. By the time the household understood what had arrived, the closed black vehicle, its horse, and the trunk strapped behind it were fully inside. The porter shut the gate at once. The driver remained on the box and called toward the house with theatrical force. Carriage for Miss Kershaw, by order of the Duke of Bellgrave. Dover without delay. A shutter opened across the street. Then another. The performance had been timed for witnesses. Amabel reached the front hall in her morning wrapper with Aunt Louisa close behind. A maid fastened a dark wool cloak around her shoulders while the porter explained what he had seen. "There's no painted crest on the panels, miss," he said. "But there's a Bellgrave badge on the harness." Amabel moved into the covered doorway without stepping beyond it. The vehicle stood less than 20 feet away. Its panels were plain and recently polished. The horse breathed white into the cold air. On the right side of the harness, near the shoulder, an oval brass badge caught the weak morning light. It bore the Bellgrave arms. Behind the carriage, secured beneath a folded tarpaulin, was her bridal trunk. She recognized the brass corner guards and the pale diagonal scratch across the lid. She had packed it for a marriage she had believed real. Someone had hidden it for nearly 2 weeks, then placed it beside false ducal livery so that her own property might accuse her. The driver called again. "Miss Kershaw, I've orders to take you straight to Dover." Amabel drew one measured breath. "Who gave you those orders?" He turned toward her but did not climb down. His coat was plain brown, not household livery. "Bellgrave business, miss. That is not a name." "I was told you'd understand." Across the street, 2 women now stood behind an upper window. A milk cart slowed near the corner. The driver wanted noise, confusion, and a frightened woman rushing toward the carriage. Amabel gave him none of them. "I did not request this vehicle," she said clearly. "I will not enter it. You will remain until my solicitor arrives." The driver's posture changed. "I can't wait on private property all morning." "You drove onto private property after stating that you had orders for me. The gate is closed behind you. You may leave on foot whenever you choose. The carriage, the harness, and my trunk will remain untouched until they are witnessed." Aunt Louisa looked at her, startled by the calm precision. Amabel had managed household disputes for years. Men often mistook a quiet woman for one who did not understand where responsibility could be fixed. The driver glanced toward the gate. "You can't keep a hired carriage. I am preserving property brought here under a false instruction. Mr. Fenner will determine what may lawfully be done. I was only paid to drive. Then tell him who paid you." His eyes moved to the brass badge. For the first time, fear displaced irritation. "I don't know the gentleman." "Then you have nothing to fear from waiting." He climbed down. "I'm not staying to be questioned. You are free to go." The porter unlocked the smaller pedestrian gate. The driver crossed the forecourt without looking at Amabel and left on foot. The vehicle remained where he had placed it. Amabel watched until the side gate closed again. Then she turned to the porter. "Send a boy to Mr. Fenner. Tell him to bring a clerk, a neutral witness, and materials for an evidence inventory. Send a second message to the Dowager Duchess. No one is to touch the badge, trunk, harness, straps, or carriage door." "Yes, miss." Aunt Louisa placed one hand lightly against Amabel's sleeve. "You are trembling, I know. Do you wish to sit?" Amabel looked at the trunk. "Not until they have seen me refuse it." The neighbors were still watching. At St. George's, society had witnessed Roland's accusation. This morning, it would witness her remain behind the threshold while the carriage waited uselessly in the forecourt. Mr. Fenner arrived within 40 minutes with his clerk and an older solicitor from the next square who agreed to act as a neutral observer. The Dowager Duchess followed with her steward. Aunt Louisa's steward and porter completed the witness group. Fenner stopped inside the gate and surveyed the scene before approaching the vehicle. "Has anything been touched?" "No," Amabel said. "The driver left on foot. The carriage has remained exactly where he brought it." Fenner recorded the position of the horse, wheels, doors, tarpaulin, trunk, straps, and harness. Each witness gave a brief statement describing what had been visible upon arrival. Only then did he allow the tarpaulin to be lifted. The trunk stood locked and intact beneath it. Amabel identified the scratch, brass corners, and maker's plate. "It belongs to me," she said. "I did not authorize its removal from Kershaw House, its storage elsewhere, or its appearance here." Fenner wrote her words without alteration. The exterior was measured, described, and signed for before two servants moved it into Aunt Louisa's locked storeroom. The lock was not opened. Fenner then examined the harness. The oval badge had no crack along its lower edge. Its maker's mark matched the description entered in Vale's sales book. Beneath the fastening plate, a stamped set number was visible. Fenner compared it only with the certified dealer record and the written inspection notes for Badge A. He did not open the blue leather case, which remained sealed beneath BA2 at his chambers. "The number corresponds to the retired Bellgrave pair," he said. "This object will be removed under separate custody." Every witness signed the description before he loosened the fastening. Badge B was lifted with folded cloth, placed inside its own packet, and sealed with the designation BB1. It never entered the blue leather case. The harness remained attached to the vehicle. Only after the packet had been signed did Tristan arrive. He had left his own carriage at the corner and entered on foot. Unwilling to add another Bellgrave vehicle to a scene already designed around his name, his gaze moved first to Amabel, then to the locked storeroom door, and finally to the sealed packet in Fenner's hand. "You secured everything before I came," he said. "Yes." "Good." There was no disappointment in the answer, no wounded pride at having been unnecessary. The simple approval warmed her more than praise would have. Fenner explained the driver's announcement, Amabel's refusal, and the order in which the objects had been recorded. Tristan read the written description of Badge B, the uncracked right-hand badge, he said. "The set number matches the archived inventory." "Can you swear to that without opening Badge A?" Fenner asked. "I can swear that the number and description correspond to the retired pair. The physical comparison should wait for lawful production." Amabel looked at him. He had once advised silence because uncertainty frightened him. Now he refused to claim 1 degree more than the evidence allowed. "Were you afraid when it arrived?" he asked quietly. "Yes." Her hands were cold inside her gloves. But fear was what they expected to move me. Tristan glanced toward the carriage door she had never approached. It did not. No. He removed one glove as if he meant to offer warmth, then stopped before reaching for her. The unfinished gesture remained between them, restrained and understood. Fenner's clerk returned near noon with the name of the hiring yard and a copied extract from its morning book. The entry recorded a cash deposit, including the number of one banknote because of its value. Fenner sent an inquiry to the banking house that afternoon. No conclusion was claimed before the records were checked. On the 1st of April, a preliminary reply arrived. The note appeared to have been issued against a Marwood account, though formal confirmation would require examination of the original banking entry. The same day, Roland's solicitor delivered his response. Roland did not deny that the carriage, badge, and trunk had appeared at Aunt Louisa's house. He claimed Amabel had arranged them herself with Bellgrave assistance to enlarge the damages she intended to demand. The lie had failed to carry her to Dover. Now Roland meant to carry it into court. By the morning of the 2nd of April, the gossip sheets had found a phrase cruel enough to sell the story twice: a ducal performance. The words appeared in one column beneath an account of the carriage at Aunt Louisa's gate, and again in another beside a drawing so inaccurate that Amabel scarcely recognized the house, the vehicle, or herself. According to the papers, a rejected bride had used Bellgrave influence to stage a second humiliation more profitable than the first. The reports mentioned Dover, the bridal trunk, and the Duke's discarded livery. They did not mention that the carriage had entered the forecourt under false instructions, that Amabel had refused to approach it, that Badge B had been sealed separately as BB1, or that the preliminary bank inquiry pointed toward a Marwood account. Lies did not always require invention. Sometimes omission was enough. Amabel read the least embellished account after breakfast, then folded it once and placed it beside her plate. Aunt Louisa watched her over the rim of a teacup. "You need not read another. I need to know what they are being told. Knowing does not make the words harmless. No, but ignorance would make me easier to surprise." Before Aunt Louisa could answer, the butler entered and announced Sir Alwyn. He came into the drawing room carrying a folded legal paper and a smaller note sealed in dark green wax. Worry had hollowed his face since the wedding, but habit still made him speak, as though urgency could replace permission. "There is an offer from Marwood's solicitor." Amabel remained seated. "What does it require?" Sir Alwyn placed the larger document on the table. "Roland will repay the wedding expenses, church fees, flowers, musicians, seamstresses, everything. Both parties will issue a private declaration that neither acted dishonorably and that the ceremony ended because of a mutual misunderstanding. Does he withdraw his accusation? The declaration avoids blame. That was not my question." Sir Alwyn looked toward Aunt Louisa, found no help there, and continued. "It says no improper arrangement can be proved against either party." Amabel opened the document. The language had been polished until guilt disappeared into symmetry. It described distress, confusion, and unreliable information. It acknowledged no false badge, no unauthorized trunk removal, no staged carriage, and no public insult. The final clause required both parties to make no further statement concerning the matter. "This leaves everything he said at the church untouched," she said. "It allows society to lose interest. Society is not losing interest. It is feeding upon the case." Then why should I give it a silence that makes him look merciful? Sir Alwyn's mouth tightened, because a trial will expose the trust, Marwood's debts, and Kershaw finances. Every private failure will become public property. They are threatening me with truths that belong to them. They belong to our family as well. My name belongs to me. The answer stopped him. He looked down at the smaller note. Roland wrote this himself. He passed it across the table. Amabel broke the seal. The handwriting was familiar. During their engagement, Roland had used the same firm hand for polite invitations, household questions, and brief assurances that he valued her judgment. Now he wrote that she had turned private disappointment into public revenge. He warned that continued proceedings would force disclosure of Sir Alwyn's debts and the limitations upon her trust. He claimed her alliance with Bellgrave had made reconciliation impossible and suggested that an honorable woman would end the spectacle before more families were injured. Amabel read the note twice. Roland still believed shame was a cord he could pull. He had simply changed which family he threatened to tighten it around. "He says the spectacle is mine," she said. "He sent a carriage to my aunt's gate. He denies that. He denied the accusation was planned, yet his mother bought the badges 16 days before the wedding. That has not been proved publicly. Then perhaps it should be." Sir Alwyn's frustration broke through. "Do you understand what this action may cost?" "Yes. Do you understand what it may cost me?" Amabel folded Roland's note along its original crease. "I understood that when I saw your signature releasing my trunk." Pain moved across his face. She did not enjoy causing it. That did not make the truth less necessary. "I believed I was preserving your marriage," he said, "and now you ask me to preserve Roland's version of its end. I ask you to consider survival. Survival is not the same as surrender." She pushed the proposed declaration back toward him. "I will not sign this." Sir Alwyn stood very still, then took the document without another argument. He left Roland's note behind. The omission felt deliberate. Perhaps he wanted her to keep the cruelty. Perhaps he no longer wished to carry it. That afternoon, Aunt Louisa accompanied Amabel by enclosed carriage to the chambers of the independent solicitor Fenner had recommended. The rooms were modest and orderly, with no Bellgrave crest, Kershaw silver, or Marwood servant in sight. Fenner attended only to identify settlement records and explain evidence custody. Badge A remained locked at his chambers beneath replacement seal BA2. Badge B remained in separate packet BB1. The bridal trunk remained secured in Aunt Louisa's locked storeroom. None of the 3 objects had been brought into the conference room. On the table lay only certified descriptions, witness accounts, copies of Vale's entries, the preliminary bank reply, Roland's written response, and the proposed declaration Amabel had refused. Tristan arrived with the Dowager Duchess and waited in an adjoining room until Amabel's counsel asked him to enter. His restraint had become familiar enough that she noticed its absence from everyone else. The solicitor explained the procedure in careful language. Amabel would proceed as plaintiff in an action for breach of promise. Roland would be defendant. Her sworn declaration would state the promise, the public breach, the accusations made against her, and the resulting injury to reputation. Separate pleadings would address his allegation that she had staged the carriage. "You must swear only to facts within your knowledge," counsel said. "We will not ask you to assert who planned the conspiracy until the evidence supports it." "Good." He placed the declaration before her. She read every line. It stated that she had not hired a Bellgrave carriage, had not authorized the removal of her trunk, had not intended to travel to Dover, and had not asked Tristan to assist an elopement. It stated that Roland had broken the engagement publicly before vows, and had accused her of dishonor before witnesses. It did not claim that Lady Drusilla had ordered the carriage. That proof was still being assembled. Amabel signed Miss Amabel Kershaw at the bottom. The name looked different. When it stood beneath a decision she had made, rather than a settlement negotiated around her, she swore that the stated facts were true to the best of her knowledge and belief. When the papers had been collected, Tristan spoke. "If my presence damages the action, I will remain away from every proceeding until I am summoned." Amabel turned toward him. "Your absence would be interpreted as easily as your presence. Then tell me what place you require. A witness." He waited. "Not a champion?" "No." She softened the answer only by meeting his eyes. "You know when Bellgrave retired the livery. You saw the accusation. You offered me a hand after Roland mocked me. Those are facts. I do not need you to promise victory." "What do you need me to promise?" "That you will answer truthfully, even when the answer is less flattering than protection." Tristan's gaze held hers. "I will." The words carried no flourish. That made them stronger. Fenner entered before the silence between them could deepen. He carried a fresh memorandum from the carriage yard. "The proprietor has identified the man who paid the deposit," he said. "Peak." Amabel's fingers tightened once around the edge of the table. Fenner continued. "The same Marwood household agent who purchased the badges." The line that had begun with brass at the altar now reached from Drusilla's written order to the carriage at Aunt Louisa's gate. Only one question remained between them and the full design. Whether Peak had also been the man who carried away Amabel's trunk on the 9th of April, exactly 1 week after Amabel placed her name upon the action. The carriage yard proprietor received her in an office that smelled of damp leather, lamp oil, and old wood. Aunt Louisa sat beside her. Mr. Fenner and Amabel's independent solicitor occupied the chairs opposite the desk. Tristan had not come. His absence was deliberate. The meeting concerned paid men, business records, and a household agent. His title would have entered the room before any witness spoke. Mr. Hales, the proprietor, kept one hand upon the open hire book as though the ledger itself might steady him. "I've told your clerk what I know," he said. "You will tell Miss Kershaw directly," counsel replied. "Then you will sign only what you can swear is true." Hales looked toward Amabel. His discomfort carried the faint shame of a man who had expected scandal and found composure. The carriage was hired on the 30th March. Closed black vehicle, sound horse, no painted crest. The customer supplied a brass fitting and asked that it be attached to the right side of the harness before dawn. "Did you examine the fitting?" Amabel asked. "Not closely." Oval, arms stamped upon it. Badge B remained sealed beneath BB1 in Fenner's custody. Badge A remained locked in the blue leather case beneath BA2. Neither object had been brought to the yard. "Who hired the vehicle?" Fenner asked. "Mr. Peak. I know now that he serves the Marwood household. At the time, he gave his name and said he acted for a private family." Hales turned the hire book so the entry could be seen without leaving his possession. He paid a cash deposit, 1 banknote and coin. "We recorded the note number because of its value." "What instructions did he give?" Amabel asked. Hales glanced toward the rear door. "The driver can answer better." Samuel Dyer entered carrying his cap in both hands. Without the brown coat he had worn on the carriage box, He seemed smaller than he had in the forecourt. He sat only after counsel told him to do so. "Mr. Dyer," Amabel said, "did Peake hire you?" "He did, miss." "What did he tell you?" Dyer turned the cap once between his fingers. "To take the carriage to the house before breakfast. To call for Miss Kershaw. To say Dover. To wait where the neighboring houses could see." "Did he say I had ordered the carriage?" "He said you'd understand when you saw it." "Did you believe that?" Dyer hesitated. "I didn't ask." The answer was not innocence. It was a decision not to know. "What were you told to do if I refused?" she asked. His eyes lifted briefly. "Leave the carriage and come away." Aunt Louisa's hand tightened around the handle of her parasol. Then the vehicle was meant to remain as a spectacle, whether my niece entered it or not. Hales looked down at the ledger. Dyer swallowed. "I suppose it was." "You did more than suppose," counsel said. "You called Miss Kershaw's name loudly and announced Dover. That was what I was paid to do." "By whom?" "Peake gave me £1 before. I left, and another after I returned on foot." "Did Lord Marwood instruct you personally?" "No." "Did Lady Marwood?" "No. I've never met either of them." "Did anyone from Bellgrave?" "No." "Did Miss Kershaw?" Dyer looked directly at Amabel. "No. She refused the carriage. She kept behind the doorway and sent for her solicitor." Fenner wrote the answer exactly. Amabel studied the driver. He had helped create a scene intended to ruin her, yet he had not purchased the badges, removed the trunk, raised debts against her expected fortune, or stood before the church and called her a burden. If she demanded that every lesser participant be crushed, she would become careless about degrees of guilt. "Mr. Dyer, my counsel can pursue remedies against you," she said. His knuckles whitened around the cap. "I've no money, miss." "Then money is not what I am asking for. Return what remains of the payment. Give a complete statement. Testify truthfully if required." Suspicion entered his face. "And if I do, I will not ask for the greatest possible punishment merely because I am angry." The room became still. Hales stopped shifting in his chair. Dyer looked down. "I knew something wasn't right," he said. "Not the whole of it. I thought they meant to frighten you or embarrass the Duke. Gentlefolk use servants for strange quarrels. You saw my trunk?" "Yes." "Did Peake tell you where it came from?" "No. It was already strapped behind the carriage when I arrived." "Did he tell you where it had been kept?" "No." "Then do not pretend that you know." Dyer nodded quickly. "I won't." He reached inside his waistcoat and placed several folded notes and coins on the desk. "This is what remains. I spent some on lodging." Fenner counted the money, issued a receipt, and placed it in temporary custody. The returned payment proved only that Dyer had been paid. It did not prove Roland had handed him the money or spoken to him. Amabel would not allow the truth to become careless simply because a stronger accusation was tempting. Dyer signed his statement. Before leaving, he paused at the door. "His Grace didn't send anyone to speak to me." Amabel understood what he was trying to say. "No," she replied. "He stayed away so you could not claim he had." The recognition reached her more deeply than she expected. Tristan's absence was not indifference. It was protection, disciplined enough to remove itself from the room. By afternoon, they had returned to the solicitor's chambers, where the second half of the evidence waited. The Kershaw porter stood beside the writing desk, hat in hand. Fenner showed him no portrait and offered no suggested name. Instead, Peake had been asked to attend separately on the pretext of answering a household inquiry. When he crossed the outer room, the porter saw him through the half-open door and went pale. "That is the man," he said. "The servant who collected Miss Kershaw's trunk on the evening before the wedding." "Are you certain?" counsel asked. I am. Dark green livery then, silver braid. He brought Lady Marwood's note and waited while Sir Alwyn signed the household release. Peake was not confronted. The identification was recorded first, before he could know he had been observed. Fenner then produced a certified copy of the trunk release receipt from Kershaw House. The original remained in the household records under notice. The receipt described one locked bridal trunk collected on the 17th March by a Marwood servant. Beneath the description stood Sir Alwyn Kershaw's signature. Amabel did not touch the paper. She knew the hand at once. Fenner placed a second document beside it. The banking house has completed its examination, he said. The note recorded in the carriage yard ledger was issued against a Marwood account. The banker will confirm the issue record, if required. Can he say who physically carried the note? Amabel asked. No. Then we must not say that Roland handed it to Peake. Correct. Fenner arranged the documents in order. What we can presently prove is this. Lady Drusilla issued the household order under which Peake purchased both Bellgrave badges on the 2nd of March. Peake collected your trunk from Kershaw House on the 17th March. Peake hired the carriage on the 30th of March and supplied the brass fitting. A banknote issued against a Marwood account formed part of the deposit. Dyer was instructed to announce Dover and remain visible. And the trunk was placed on that same carriage, Aunt Louisa said. Yes, but we still cannot prove where it was kept between 17 and the 30th of March. Amabel looked at the line of documents. The missing days did not weaken what had been established. They marked the one stretch the conspirators had managed to keep hidden. They used my property as though it could speak for them, she said. The badge said Bellgrave. The trunk said preparation. The driver said Dover. And you said no, Aunt Louisa replied. Fenner drew the trunk release receipt nearer to the center of the table. There is one difficulty we cannot avoid. Sir Alwyn's evidence will be necessary. The defense will say the trunk left Kershaw House lawfully, and that its movement cannot be suspicious if your father authorized it. Amabel read her father's signature again. To prove the truth, she would have to show that he had surrendered her property under pressure without asking her. She could protect Kershaw's name by allowing the release to remain vague, or she could protect her own by making his failure part of the record. For the first time since the church, the next wound did not come from Roland or Drusilla. It came from the man who had raised her and still expected love to soften consequence. Ask my father to prepare his statement, she said. Fenner's expression remained grave. He may refuse to include Lady Marwood's threat. Amabel looked at the signature that had opened the first door of the conspiracy. Then he will have to decide whether he fears the truth more than he regrets what his silence allowed. On the 19th of April, 3 men came to Aunt Louisa's house to persuade Tristan that truth had become politically inconvenient. They arrived during the proper calling hour in dark coats and grave expressions, carrying memoranda rather than condolences. 2 belonged to his parliamentary circle. The third was his private secretary, who held a folded paper so tightly that its edges had bent beneath his fingers. Aunt Louisa received them in the front drawing-room. The Dowager Duchess sat beside the fire, upright and watchful. Amabel stood near the window with her mother's ivory prayer book closed upon the table at her side. No evidence had been brought into the room. Badge A remained beneath seal BA2 in Mr. Fenner's custody. Badge B remained in its separate packet, BB1. The bridal trunk was still locked in Aunt Louisa's storeroom. This conversation concerned no object. It concerned what Tristan would surrender to keep those objects from being publicly examined. Lord Ashcombe, the older of the two political allies, spoke first. "Your Grace, Marwood's defense is entirely predictable. He will say you encouraged Miss Kershaw before the wedding, then used Bellgrave influence to manufacture evidence after she was rejected." Tristan stood beside the mantel, with one hand resting lightly upon the back of a chair. That statement would be false. False statements are useful when they answer what people already wish to believe. The younger man leaned forward. "Your opponents in Parliament are preparing to call this a ducal vendetta. They will say you destroyed a viscount because he stood between you and another man's bride. Miss Kershaw was never another man's wife. The newspapers will not trouble themselves with that distinction. Then the distinction should be repeated until they do." Lord Ashcombe exhaled. "You cannot cross-examine a newspaper." "No, I can refuse to purchase it." The private secretary unfolded the memorandum. "There is a possible resolution. Lord Marwood's most urgent obligations could be discharged through an intermediary. No Bellgrave name would appear. In return, his solicitor would withdraw the accusation that Miss Kershaw staged the carriage and consent to a private declaration ending the dispute." Amabel watched Tristan. She knew the offer had been designed for him rather than for her. It presented silence as efficiency, payment as mercy, and control as protection. Tristan did not ask the amount. No. Lord Ashcombe's brows rose. "You have not heard the terms. The terms are payment in exchange for a lie becoming unchallengeable. The allegation would be withdrawn without admission. That is how settlements work, not this one." The younger man glanced toward Amabel. "Miss Kershaw's reputation may suffer less if the matter ends quietly." Amabel left the window. All three men rose. "Please sit," she said. "I would rather be heard than ceremonially accommodated." They obeyed with varying degrees of discomfort. She turned to Tristan. "May I ask you 3 questions? You may ask me anything. Will you pay Lord Marwood to remain silent? No. Will you use Bellgrave influence to frighten editors from reporting the action? No. Will you answer every lawful question in court, even if the answer embarrasses you or damages your political work?" The room became still. This was the only question whose cost had not yet arrived in full. Tristan looked at her, not at the men who had come to preserve his career. "Yes. Even if they ask why you attended the wedding? Yes. Even if they suggest I expected you to offer more than a hand? Yes. Even if they ask whether your first advice was that I should bury the matter." His pause was brief but honest. "Yes." Lord Ashcombe stood again. "Your Grace, I must advise you not to commit yourself before knowing how broadly opposing counsel may question you." Tristan did not look away from Amabel. "Your advice is noted. Your reform bills may not survive the scandal. Then they will have to survive upon their merits. This is not a committee room. The public will not separate evidence from appetite. That does not give me the right to purchase Miss Kershaw's silence for my convenience." The younger man gathered his gloves. "You are allowing feeling to endanger work that affects thousands." Amabel felt the accusation turn toward her without being spoken. Tristan heard it too. His voice cooled. "Do not make Miss Kershaw responsible for a choice I have made in my own name." No one answered. The 3 men understood dismissal at last. They gathered the memorandum and left the private secretary, pausing only long enough to receive a quiet instruction that no payment, warning, or private approach was to be made without Tristan's express knowledge. When the door closed, Aunt Louisa poured tea that no one had requested. The Dowager Duchess examined the fire with deliberate concentration. Their presence preserved propriety, while granting Amabel and Tristan the nearest thing to privacy the room allowed. Tristan crossed only as far as the chair opposite her. He did not sit until she did. The prayer book remained closed between them. "You asked whether I would answer every question," he said. "I did. There is one answer I should give before counsel forces it from me." Amabel waited. "When I advised a private settlement at your aunt's house, I told myself I was sparing you exposure. That was true, but it was not complete. You were also sparing yourself." "Yes." He accepted the judgment without movement. "After the clerk I condemned too quickly, I learned to fear public certainty. But fear became an excuse. I wanted boundaries I could control. Money paid, statements drafted, newspapers kept at a distance. I wanted to decide what danger you should be allowed to face. You wanted to protect me without trusting my judgment. Yes, and now I understand that. Protection, which removes your choice, resembles the injury it claims to prevent." Amabel looked at the closed book. He had not asked her to excuse the mistake, because its intention had been kind. He had named the fault without polishing it. "Understanding is not the same as proving you have changed," she said. "No. Your allies were right about one thing. Consequence has not fully arrived. Then judge me when it does." The answer asked for no immediate forgiveness. That was why it carried weight. A carriage passed beyond the window, its wheels briefly filling the silence. Tristan's gaze rested upon Amabel's hand near the prayer book, but he made no attempt to touch it. "There is another truth I will not conceal," he said. Her breath slowed. "What truth?" "I wish to court you." The room did not alter, yet everything within it seemed newly exact. Tristan continued before hope could be mistaken for pressure. "I will not ask your permission while my testimony remains part of your action. I will not allow my title to become another argument against your credibility. When judgment has been given, I will ask properly." Amabel held his gaze. "And if the judgment is against me, I will still ask. You may feel differently after hearing what they say in court. They have already said enough in a church to show me what cruelty sounds like." His voice softened. "What matters to me is what you choose when no one commands you." She placed her palm flat upon the ivory cover, not toward him. "This is not an answer. I know. It is not a refusal." Something quiet changed in his face. "I know that too." He remained where he was. The distance between them no longer felt empty. It felt chosen. A knock came before either could speak again. Aunt Louisa's butler entered, carrying a message addressed to Mr. Fenner, but redirected to the house because of urgency. Amabel broke the outer seal at Fenner's written instruction marked upon the cover. Inside was a note from Mr. Vale, a representative claiming to act for Lady Drusilla Marwood, had offered him £50 to remember that the 2 Bellgrave badges might have been sold separately. Vale had refused, but the messenger had promised to return. Tristan read the note over Amabel's shoulder without touching it. "They are no longer trying to hide the evidence," he said. Amabel folded the paper along its original crease. "No. They are trying to teach it a different memory. Mr. Vale arrived at Fenner's chambers on the 20th April, carrying the original sales book beneath one arm and the receipt bundle tied in fresh cotton tape. He had not slept well. The grey beneath his eyes and the care with which he checked the corridor before entering made that plain. Amabel sat beside Aunt Louisa at the long conference table. Her independent solicitor occupied the chair nearest the writing desk. The Dowager Duchess had come as witness to the propriety of the meeting, but Tristan had not entered the room. At his own instruction, he waited in another part of the building, so no one could later claim that a duke had stood over a tradesman while his statement was prepared. Mr. Vale placed the ledger on the table without surrendering possession. "The man returned yesterday," he said. Fenner opened his notebook. "The representative who claimed to act for Lady Marwood?" "Yes. He was older than Peake. Well dressed. He gave no written authority." "What did he ask you to do?" Vale removed a folded note from his coat and laid it on the blotting pad. "He said 2 years can confuse a man's memory. He suggested I might have sold 1 badge in March and the 2nd at another time." "Did he mention the ledger?" Amabel asked. "He said ledgers can be corrected when an entry was made in haste." Aunt Louisa's expression hardened. "Corrected for £50. Vale looked at her. That was the sum. Fenner did not touch the note until Vale had described when and how it had been received. Then he unfolded it with a clean sheet beneath his hands. The language contained no direct command to lie. It expressed Lady Marwood's hope that a respectable tradesman would not injure an ancient family through uncertain recollection. At the bottom, a line promised generous compensation for any inconvenience caused by revising the record. "Did you accept anything?" counsel asked. "No." "Did you promise to alter the entry?" "No." "Why not?" Vale looked down at the sales book. "At first, because the entry is mine and it is accurate. Then I understood what the change would mean." His hand rested over lot 47. "I sold old brass. I did not agree to sell a woman's name." The words entered the room without flourish. Amabel felt them more deeply than any declaration of loyalty. Vale had no title to defend, no romance to prove, and no family obligation toward her. He had simply decided the truth belonged where he had written it. Fenner asked him to read the entry once more. Vale identified the date, the 2nd March 1861, the matched pair of Bellgrave badges, the crack upon one, the shared set number, the Marwood livery, Peake's signature, and Lady Drusilla's written household authority. He did not claim to know the purpose. He did not claim Roland had been present. He did not improve a single fact. "Will you swear to this in court?" counsel asked. Vale hesitated only once. "I will." "You may face questions about His Grace's influence." "His Grace has not spoken to me since the day at my establishment." "He arranged independent advice for witnesses who feared retaliation," Fenner said. "He did not direct your statement." Vale nodded. "Then that is what I will say." The original sales book and receipt bundle remained with him under written notice that they must be preserved for production. Fenner kept only certified copies, Vale's signed statement, and the attempted inducement note after Vale formally placed it in his custody. By May, the action had ceased to move at the speed of scandal. It moved at the speed of law. Pleadings were exchanged. The carriage yard proprietor authenticated the higher entry. Samuel Dyer signed his final statement and repeated that no Bellgrave servant had ever instructed him. The banker agreed to produce the note record and Roland's bills of exchange. Tristan's political opponents printed questions about his presence at the wedding, but he purchased no silence and sent no private warnings. Amabel saw less of him during those months than she had expected. When he called at Aunt Louisa's house, he spoke of the Relief Committee, Parliament, and whatever book her aunt had placed upon the table. He did not ask for the answer she had postponed. His restraint created its own tension. It asked her to believe that a man could remain loyal without remaining constantly visible. On the 18th July, Sir Alwyn came to Fenner's chambers to sign his statement. Summer heat had settled over London, but he wore his gloves and kept them on after taking his seat. Amabel sat opposite him. Tristan stood at the far end of the room with the Dowager Duchess, present because Sir Alwyn had requested his attendance. But he made no claim upon the decision before them. Fenner placed the draft on the table. Sir Alwyn touched one paragraph. "This sentence is unnecessary." "Which sentence?" Amabel asked. He did not look at her. "The one stating that Lady Marwood threatened to cancel the wedding unless the trunk left Kershaw House that evening. Did she make that threat?" "Yes." "Then why is it unnecessary?" "Because it makes me appear weak." The honesty surprised her. He had not dressed the fear as concern for family honor. Not yet. "It shows why you signed the release," she said. "The receipt already proves that I signed. It does not prove why. The reason does not help you." "No." Sir Alwyn removed one glove finger by finger. "It helps you." The words carried a weariness Amabel had never heard in him before. "I believed obedience to rank would preserve your future. I did not stop to ask whether the future being preserved still belonged to you." He looked toward Tristan. "Your Grace, must every failure be spoken aloud?" Tristan's answer was quiet. "That decision belongs to Miss Kershaw and her council." Sir Alwyn turned back to his daughter. "If this is read in court, Kershaw House will be ridiculed." The old instinct rose within Amabel. She wanted to protect him from public shame because she had spent years protecting him from unpaid accounts, disappointed creditors, and the consequences of his own hesitation. She looked at the draft. Vale had refused £50 rather than change one line. Dyer had admitted what he had done. Tristan had promised to reveal his first wrong advice under oath. She could not demand full truth from men with less power, then excuse her father because his weakness hurt her to witness. "If I remove that sentence," she said, "I make your silence more valuable than theirs." Sir Alwyn closed his eyes. "I made a mistake." "Name it." He breathed in slowly. "I treated your consent as less important than Lord Marwood's approval." No one moved. Amabel did not feel triumph. The truth wounded because it had finally been given its proper name. "That belongs in the statement," she said. Sir Alwyn removed his second glove. Then he signed. 2 days later, Fenner completed the final evidence schedule. Badge A remained inside the blue leather case, beneath replacement seal BA2, applied after the witnessed inspection on the 24th March. The record also preserved the breaking of the original vestry seal and every signature present when the case was resealed. Badge B remained in its separate packet beneath BB1, untouched since the forecourt inventory on the 31st of March. The bridal trunk remained locked in Aunt Louisa's storeroom under written notice. Vale retained the original sales book and receipt bundle. The carriage yard proprietor retained the original hire book. The banking house retained the original note record and bills until lawful production. Fenner held the certified copies, custody statements, Dyer's returned payment, the attempted inducement note, and Sir Alwyn's signed admission. No object had changed hands without a record. No witness had been allowed to borrow another witness's memory. On the evening of the 28th July, Tristan called only long enough to ask one question. "Marwood's counsel intends to say I purchased every witness. Do you still wish me to answer every question?" Amabel met his gaze. "Especially the ones meant to shame you." "Then I will." At dawn on the 29th July, she dressed in a dark summer gown and placed no bridal ornament upon herself. Her mother's ivory prayer book went beneath her cloak, close to her heart and separate from every legal paper. when Aunt Louisa's carriage drew up. Amabel stepped into it not as a woman being carried toward judgment, but as the plaintiff who had chosen to ask for it. Westminster Hall had witnessed coronations, trials, petitions, and ruin, yet on the morning of the 29th of July, 1861, Amabel Kershaw entered beneath its vast timbered roof, carrying nothing more dangerous than a closed prayer book beneath her cloak and the truth she had refused to surrender. Barristers moved through the stone passages in black gowns. Clerks carried bundles tied in red tape. Ladies who had declined to receive her now occupied the public benches, while gentlemen who had repeated Rowland's accusation as amusement lowered their voices when she passed. Aunt Louisa remained beside her until counsel directed Amabel to the plaintiff's place. Across the court sat Rowland Marwood, Viscount Marwood, composed in a dark coat that restored to him the appearance of respectability. Lady Drusilla sat behind him beneath a veil. Tristan waited apart from Amabel's counsel, his mother near him. Neither Bellgrave title permitted to answer in the jury's name. The first evidence brought forward was the blue leather case. Mr. Fenner identified it, then read the custody record aloud. Badge A had been surrendered by Rowland at St. George's on the 18th of March and sealed in the vestry. That original seal had been opened lawfully on the 24th of March before named witnesses at the Bellgrave carriage house. After the badge was inspected, the case had been closed under replacement seal BA2. The court clerk examined that seal now. It remained intact. Only then was the case opened. Badge A lay inside, oval and darkened with age, the Bellgrave arms still visible above the hairline crack along its lower edge. Mr. Rudge identified the retired design, maker's mark, and set number. A second packet was produced separately. Fenner identified BB1 as the seal applied in Aunt Louisa's forecourt on the 31st of March. It too remained unbroken. When opened, Badge B showed the same arms, maker, and set number, but no crack. The two pieces that had once made Rowland's accusation appear credible now lay side by side as proof that someone had acquired a matched pair. Mr. Vale produced his original sales book and receipt bundle. Under oath, he identified Lot 47, sold on the 2nd of March, to Peake, a servant in Marwood livery, acting under Lady Drusilla's written household authority. Did the order state that the badges were intended for an elopement? Rowland's counsel asked. No, Vale replied. Then you cannot know her ladyship's purpose. I know. She ordered both badges. And that the sale was lawful. The sale was lawful. The memory they later asked me to purchase was not. A movement passed through the benches. Vale described the offer of £50 to revise his recollection, but did not claim Lady Drusilla had spoken to him personally. He gave only the note and the words used by the emissary, the carriage yard proprietor. Followed with the original hire book, he identified Peake as the man who hired the closed black carriage on the 30th March, supplied the brass fitting, and paid the deposit with coin and a recorded banknote. Samuel Dyer entered with his cap held between both hands. He admitted that Peake had ordered him to arrive before breakfast, call Amabel's name, announce Dover, and wait where the neighbouring houses could see. Did Lord Marwood instruct you? Opposing counsel asked. No. Did Lady Marwood? No. Did the Duke of Bellgrave? No. Did Miss Kershaw? Dyer raised his head. No. She refused the carriage. She stayed inside the doorway and sent for her solicitor. The Kershaw porter then identified Peake as the servant who had collected Amabel's locked bridal trunk on the evening of the 17th of March. Sir Alwyn entered the witness box after him. He looked older than he had at the church, though only 4 months had passed. Amabel's counsel placed the trunk release receipt before him. Is that your signature? It is. Why did you release the trunk? Sir Alwyn's gaze moved briefly toward Amabel. Lady Marwood said the wedding might be cancelled unless it left Kershaw House that evening. Did your daughter consent? No. Did you ask her? His answer came quietly. No. Roland's counsel rose. The trunk was intended to leave upon marriage, was it not? Yes. Then its removal was not suspicious in itself. Sir Alwyn could have accepted the offered escape. Months earlier, he would have. It became suspicious when it was hidden, placed upon a hired carriage, and used to accuse my daughter of a journey she never authorized. He paused, then added the sentence he had once wanted removed. I treated her consent as less important than Lord Marwood's approval. Amabel did not look away. The truth did not become less painful because it served her. The banker supplied the motive. He produced Roland's bills of exchange and the issue record for the banknote used in the carriage deposit. The largest bill fell due on the 15th of May. Correspondence referred repeatedly to the anticipated marriage portion and Roland's expectation of substantial capital after the ceremony. Fenner then identified the final settlement clause, protecting Amabel's maternal principle for her separate use. Roland had learned its meaning on the 17th of March, yet the badges had been purchased on the 2nd March. The instrument of accusation existed before the last settlement meeting, ready if the marriage failed to release the money he required. When Amabel entered the witness box, the hall seemed to contract around her. Her counsel asked only what was necessary. She stated that she had not hired a Bellgrave carriage, had not authorized the removal of her trunk, had not intended to travel to Dover, and had not summoned Tristan to the church. Roland's counsel approached with grave courtesy. Miss Kershaw, you took the Duke of Bellgrave's hand before the entire congregation. I did. You did so without hesitation. I hesitated long, enough to understand that he was offering me a choice to leave with him, a choice to leave Lord Marwood's humiliation. And soon afterward his grace assisted your action. He supplied facts concerning his own livery. My counsel directed the action. Would society have believed you without a duke beside you? Amabel looked toward the jury. Society believed a badge before it asked who bought it. That is why I came here, with records, dates, witnesses, and an action in my own name. Tristan was called after her. He confirmed that Bellgrave had retired the badges in 1859, that he had not hired the carriage, and that he had not directed any witness. Roland's counsel asked why he had attended the wedding and whether affection had influenced his conduct. My mother knew Miss Kershaw's mother, Tristan said. That is why we attended. Did you advise Miss Kershaw to settle privately? I did. A murmur moved through the spectators. Why? Because I mistook silence for protection. And when she refused, you devoted Bellgrave influence to her cause. I gave lawful information and ensured witnesses could obtain independent advice. I did not write their statements. You expect the jury to believe affection played no part. Tristan looked at Amabel once, then back at counsel. Affection does not alter the date in a sales book, the number upon a banknote, or Miss Kershaw's refusal to enter the carriage. But you wished the matter buried. At first, his voice carried clearly through the hall. Miss Kershaw understood before I did that silence would protect only the liar. Roland entered the witness box near the end of the day. He denied ordering the carriage and claimed his mother had purchased the badges for a private household entertainment. He insisted Amabel had used Bellgrave influence to enlarge a grievance into scandal. When confronted with Peake's purchases, the trunk receipt, the hire book, the banknote, and the timing of his debts, indignation replaced explanation. At last he turned toward Amabel. She needed a duke to make herself credible. The insult echoed the church, but this time she stood inside a record he did not control. With the court's permission, she rose. His Grace offered me a hand. He did not give me this evidence, sign my declaration, or speak these facts for me. The jury withdrew. They returned before the light had fully faded from the high windows. Their verdict was for Amabel, with substantial damages. No applause followed. The clerk entered Miss Amabel Kershaw's name into the record, and for one suspended moment she heard nothing else. Sir Alwyn bowed his head. Lady Drusilla's gloved hand closed around the edge of the bench. Tristan did not move toward Amabel. He waited until she turned and found him. Only then did he incline his head. Outside the hall, representatives of Roland's creditors were already waiting for his solicitor. Evidence concerning the staged carriage, the attempted inducement of Vale, and the use of Amabel's property was passed to counsel for whatever further proceedings the law allowed. No civil jury pronounced a criminal punishment that day. It did something more exact. It declared whose promise had been broken and whose accusation had failed. Amabel descended the stone steps with Aunt Louisa and the Dowager Duchess beside her. Tristan waited below, near enough to be present, and far enough not to claim the moment. "Miss Kershaw," he said, "may I call tomorrow?" Her prayer book remained closed beneath her hand. She looked at the man who had testified to his own mistake rather than disguise it as nobility. "You may call tomorrow," she said. During the proper hour, on Christmas morning, nearly 5 months after the verdict, frost silvered the lawns of Rookhaven Court, and the bells from the parish church carried across the Kent fields. Amabel stood at the window of her private sitting room with a letter open in one hand and her mother's ivory prayer book resting on the table beside her. The pressed myrtle remained between its first pages, pale and fragile, exactly as it had been when she carried it to St. George's. Nothing new had been added, nothing needed to replace it. The room around her bore none of the strained grandeur she had once associated with marriage. A small fire burned steadily. Winter light touched the dark green silk of her gown. Beyond the door, the household prepared for Christmas dinner with the quiet order of people who had learned that their new duchess noticed labor without turning gratitude into spectacle. The letter in Amabel's hand had arrived from the fund established, but with part of the damages recovered from Roland. Its first beneficiary was the daughter of a Bristol merchant whose fiancé had vanished after her family spent nearly all their savings on wedding preparations. The young woman's lodging had been secured for 6 months, and the dressmaker, who had gone unpaid, had received every shilling owed. She had not been forced to repeat her humiliation before a crowded committee, or prove that her suffering was sufficiently graceful. Amabel read the final sentence twice. The woman had found work assisting a milliner and wished the trustees to know that she had slept through the night for the first time in weeks. Tristan entered only after knocking and hearing Amabel's answer. Marriage had not erased the courtesy with which he approached a closed door. If anything, it had made the habit more deliberate. "You have good news," he said. Amabel handed him the report. "The first payment has reached her." He read it without moving closer than the space she had already offered. "Then the damages have done something more useful than punish Marwood." "That was the intention," It was your intention. Amabel looked toward the frost-bright lawn. Roland remained liable for the judgment. While creditors pursued the bills he had once expected her fortune to satisfy. Lady Drusilla had not been dramatically cast out of every respectable house. Reality was less theatrical and more exact. Some doors remained open because old alliances were stubborn. The important ones had closed. Invitations no longer placed her at the center of charitable committees or marriage negotiations. And tradesmen who once feared her displeasure now insisted upon written instructions. Her influence had narrowed to the space where truth had left it. Sir Alwyn had reduced Kershaw House to a smaller staff and a scale he could honestly maintain. The letter he had sent that morning lay beside the fund report. He had not asked for immediate forgiveness. He had listed his remaining debts plainly, described which rooms had been closed for winter, and admitted that he had spent years calling avoidance prudence. At the end, he had written that Amabel had been right to include his statement, even though he had hated her for 1 hour after leaving Fenner's chambers. The hatred, he said, had passed. The shame had become instruction. Their relationship was not healed into its former shape, because its former shape had depended upon her silence. It was becoming something narrower, slower, and true. "Will he come in January?" Tristan asked. "For 2 days. Do you wish him to stay longer?" "No." Tristan nodded. He never praised her for setting a boundary, as though restraint made her unusually brave. He simply accepted that she had chosen it. The months between the verdict and Christmas had taught Amabel the difference between a man who admired independence in theory and one who permitted it to inconvenience him. Tristan had called at Aunt Louisa's house during proper hours throughout August and September. He had never asked her to reward his testimony, never implied that the jury had cleared a path she owed him the right to enter. They had walked beneath a chaperone's watch, argued over parliamentary reform, and spent one entire afternoon discussing whether charity that required public gratitude was charity at all. In late September, he had proposed in Aunt Louisa's morning room with the Dowager Duchess seated near the window and Aunt Louisa pretending to read. He had not promised to hide Amabel from a cruel world. He had asked whether she would allow him to stand beside her within it. She had answered only after independent counsel reviewed the new marriage settlement. Her maternal principle remained protected. Its income remained under the agreed trustees. No political ambition, ducal debt, or household demand could reach the capital without her consent. Tristan had read every clause and objected to none. Their wedding on the 12th November had taken place in the parish church near Rookhaven Court. It was small, properly witnessed, and free of society's hunger for performance. Amabel wore pearl grey silk, not the ivory gown from St. George's. Tristan had waited before the altar with his hands at his sides until she reached him. Then he offered one hand and allowed her to choose again. After the legal proceedings ended, the bridal trunk had been released from Aunt Louisa's locked storeroom and returned to Amabel under written acknowledgement. It now stood in a dressing room at Rookhaven, its lock intact and its contents rearranged. She had removed the wedding veil, folded the abandoned gown separately, and used the trunk for winter blankets and household papers. It was no longer evidence. It was no longer an accusation. It had become an ordinary object because she had decided that objects should not be permitted to govern memory forever. Tristan finished reading the fund report and placed it beside the prayer book. "My mother has altered the dinner seating twice," he said. She claims both changes were necessary to preserve civilization. Your mother considers most seating arrangements a defense of civilization. She says the same of marriage settlements. Amabel smiled. Then perhaps she is right more often than we admit. By evening, the dining room glowed with candlelight, reflected in old silver. The Dowager Duchess presided at one end of the table with Aunt Louisa beside her. Mr. Fenner had been invited with his widowed sister, not because he had saved Amabel, but because he had refused to let evidence become theatre. Conversation moved through parish repairs, winter rents, Parliament, and the alarming quantity of plum pudding ordered by the cook. No one spoke Roland's name. His absence did not require ceremony. Before grace, Amabel opened her mother's prayer book herself. The ivory cover showed faint wear near the clasp. The pressed myrtle remained undisturbed. She read the prayer aloud beneath the high ceiling, her voice clear before the household that now addressed her as her grace. When she finished, she closed the book and placed it beside her plate. Later, after the guests had gone into the drawing room, Tristan remained near the end of the long table, while Amabel made certain the prayer book had not been moved. Beyond the windows, the winter fields lay dark beneath a cloudless sky. "Are you happy?" he asked. The question contained no demand for reassurance. "Today? Today. Here, with me. Any part you wish to answer." Amabel looked at him across the candlelit table. Yes, she allowed the word to stand before continuing, not because the verdict repaired everything. It did not because society changed. It did not do that either. No, I am happy because nothing in this house asks me to disappear in order to remain. Tristan's expression softened. Then we must keep it so. He rested one hand upon the back of a chair. "Do you remember the hand I offered you in the church? I remember thinking it belonged to the most feared man in the room. And yet you took it. You waited." He became very still. Was that what mattered? Amabel looked at his hand. Once, it had been the only open path away from public ruin. Since then, he had never used it to direct her testimony, close around her choices, or lead her somewhere she had not agreed to go. "I did not know where your hand would lead," she said. "That was not why I took it." "Why did you?" "Because you offered it without deciding for me. You let it remain empty until I chose." His voice lowered. "I will spend my life trying to deserve that choice. Do not spend it trying to earn what has already been freely given." Amabel placed the closed prayer book beside her plate. Then she turned her palm upward across the table. Tristan did not reach too quickly. Even now, he waited long enough for the invitation to be certain. Only then did he take her hand. His fingers closed gently around hers, while voices and laughter drifted from the drawing room beyond. Once, that hand had helped her leave an altar where another man had tried to make shame the final truth of her life. Now it asked her to go nowhere. It simply remained with hers, in the home they had chosen together.